Hello and welcome to this session where I will be looking at the analysis of CAT 2023 evening slot, that is 4:30 to 6:30 slot, how the paper was and what we expect the score versus percentile to be. So all of you who took the CAT paper in the third slot, please do watch this video. But even those of you who have taken the CAT in the morning or afternoon slot, you might find this discussion useful, particularly towards the end, where I'll be looking at a comparison across the three slots. And those of you who did not take the CAT this year but are planning to take other management entrance tests in the near future or planning to take CAT next year, you also might find this analysis useful to understand what kind of questions come and what's the difficulty level and expected percentile. Okay, so a little bit about myself. I am Shahana. I am the director for Time Bhopal and Indore. I take CAT classes and I am an alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad. So in this presentation, I will be giving first of all an overview of the paper pattern in slot 3. After that, I'll spend some time in discussing each of the three sections, VA, DI and Quant, what kind of questions came and difficulty level, etc. Then an overall analysis of the paper in terms of difficulty level, score versus percentile analysis. And then, like I said, towards the end, we'll look at all the three slots in a snapshot. So let's begin with the overview of the evening slot of CAT 2023 this year. So there were no major surprises at all. It was on expected lines. The paper pattern was similar to what had come last year also. That is, in the VARC section, 24 questions, out of which 16 were multiple choice RC questions spread across 4 passages. So 4 questions into 4 passages. So 16 questions there and 8 questions in verbal ability, out of which 4 were multiple choice and 4 were of the type in the answer type. And in DILR there were 4 caselets, each caselet having 5 questions, so that's a total of 20 questions, out of which 8 were type in the answer type and 12 were multiple choice. And in Quant there were 22 questions, out of which 8 were type in the answer and 14 were multiple choice. So in terms of the paper pattern, this is exactly what we had expected. So there was no new element as such that was introduced. Based on the feedback that we have obtained from the students, we have tried to contact a wide number of our students across different test centers to get accurate understanding of the exam as they had taken it. And we did not get any major reports on difficulties in terms of technical difficulties or any error in the questions as such. A few minor technical difficulties were sorted out easily at the centers. So it was an overall smooth experience and good for the students who had prepared for the exam, that there was no major surprise in the pattern of the questions. So now let's come to the first section, that is verbal ability and RC. In this, like I said, there were 16 questions in RC as expected. And if we look at the verbal ability questions, there were 8 questions. So out of them, para formation questions, we had 2, all were type in the answer type. Sentence placement, we had 2 questions in which one sentence is given and we have to choose what is the placement or the position, correct position of the sentence in a given paragraph. Then we had para summary questions and then we had odd one out questions. So typically this is what we expect, that the para formation or sequencing or para jumble as it is called, these kind of questions are typically type in the answer type. So that was what happened this year also. And odd one out are also normally type in the answer type. So we had 2 questions each of these varieties, and sentence placement and para summary also 2 varieties each. So no major surprise. Sometimes we can get questions which are slightly of different variety, that is para completion questions. Sometimes have come in previous papers in which one part of a paragraph is missing, and from the options we have to choose which statement best fills in or best fits in the paragraph. So that para completion type did not feature in slot 3 of CAT, but these 4 were the usual suspects, these 4 variety: para jumble, sentence placement, para summary and odd one out are the usual ones that we expect. So again, there were no surprises. Let's take a closer look at the RC passages. And in this, on the slide, you can see the basic theme or the topic. This is based on the feedback of students, that the 4 passages, one was based on Pinker's rationality, which was a little bit, it was actually more of a book review of a book written by a philosopher Pinker, but it basically discussed the philosophical concepts that were written in this book. Then we had one passage which was based on patrimony laws and major artifacts. So overall, if I talk about theme, we can say this is more of a news article or something to do with sociology or something to do with archaeology. Then we had another passage which was on romanticism, in particular in literature. So this was, we can, overall theme we can say is about literary concepts. And then lastly, we had one passage on climate change. And again, it was actually something of a book review. The name of the book mentioned in the passage was Nutmeg's Curse, okay, which was a book written by Amitav Ghosh.
So these were the 4 themes, and again these are on expected lines over the past years. Generally, what the feedback we get from students is that there's normally some passage on climate change or on environment conservation or on science related to climate change, and one passage definitely is somewhat towards philosophy. So no surprises there. We didn't have any passage which was directly pertaining to economics or politics. In terms of the readability, the language of the passages, none of them can be called as very easy because they all seem to contain certain technical words. Like, for example, you can see that, as per the reports of the students, the second passage which talked about museum artifacts, it did make a mention of patrimony laws. So one had to understand maybe a little bit about what patrimony means as an example. Then the book, the 4th passage, which was about climate change and Nutmeg's Curse, had a very interesting word actually, which, as per the reports of the students, it talked about the concept of Gaia. And students who did not understand what this word or this term refers to might have faced a little bit of difficulty in solving questions. So like this, there were certain difficult words, and overall the passage paragraphs were a little dense. So passage number 1 and 2 can be called moderate difficulty level, and 3 and 4 were difficult. So as I mentioned earlier, these are subjective opinions, but we have just talked to a large number of students, and so this is more or less, we can say, the average feedback given by the students. And difficulty level in terms of the questions was also high, and the reason was that certainly there were no direct questions. There were many questions which required the student to use critical reasoning, as in which of the following, if true, will undermine the basic premise of the passage. Concepts like this, questions like this. So questions, the language was difficult, as well as the options. One had to spend some time in reading the passage well to be able to select the right answer. And in verbal ability also, the level of difficulty was moderate in most of the cases, and para summary, one can say, was slightly higher difficulty level. Overall, between RC and VA, perhaps the VA questions were more doable than the RC, but then of course one has to do RC also to get a good score, can't do only VA. So this is our analysis, that if a student is able to do 3 passages, and 3 passages meaning 12 questions, and 6 questions from VA, that is a total of 18 questions, then that will be a very, very good number of attempts, assuming, as of course, that the student does not do any guesswork, but is actually, thinking and selecting options carefully. And this time, the only probably silver lining, when we have said all the questions were very difficult, certainly, but in terms of the options, unlike in previous years, there weren't too many questions which had close options. It certainly needed perhaps rereading of the passages multiple times, because the language of the passages was dense.
So one probably had to reread them a few times to be able to locate from where to get the answer. But once you read the passage and you understand the passage, after that the options were in most of the questions not very close or confusing. So that was something which was different maybe from last year's pattern. But overall, one can say in terms of the difficulty level or in terms of the theme, there was again no major surprise element thrown up, similar to last year's VARC. Now, important part, what is our estimate of the cutoffs? This is first cut analysis. As and when we get more and more feedback from the students, we will have a clearer and more accurate picture in terms of percentile prediction. This is what we think, that a student who can attempt about 9 attempts, okay, which means maybe about attempting 2 RC passages, maybe not all the questions, but about 5-6 odd RC questions and 3 odd VA questions, and always assuming that you're doing the questions carefully, so you have good accuracy. So such a student might expect to get around 85 percentile and clear the cutoff for this section. And a student with around 11 attempts, which might mean about 2 to 3 RC passages, selected questions plus a few VA questions, can expect 95 percentile at around 27 to 29 marks. And like I mentioned earlier also, a really good score and a really good attempt would be 3 RCs plus VA will be really good attempts. So 16 to 18 is very good number of attempts with good accuracy. You can afford to get, you can expect to get 99 odd percentile. But the cutoff should be in the range of 18 to 20 marks. Okay, now let's look at the second section, that is DILR, in which we got 4 caselets. And 2 of them we can say are of the DI variety and 2 of them are of the LR variety. But even in the LR variety, like has been mentioned in the table, there was a little bit of calculation and quant was involved. So there was no pure logic based caselet as such. And DI, one always expects, going by previous patterns, that we are not going to get very easy caselets. And this time also, first 2 caselets mentioned in this table were moderate difficulty level, but the last 2 were fairly difficult. So overall, high difficulty level section. Very interestingly, again, like I had mentioned in VA section, that there were some particular words used in the passages, and students who did not know the meaning of those words might have faced difficulty in solving questions. Similarly, in the DI slot 3, some of the caselets had statistical terms like median was used. So in case students forget what median means, then it will be difficult for them to solve the caselet. And this I mentioned earlier, even in the LR questions, calculations were needed. Not exactly calculations where you needed to use the calculator, but yes, you had to work out a few equations. Overall, in terms of the difficulty level, one can say that again, it was quite similar to the last year's paper. So what is our estimated cutoffs for the DI section? Again, this is as on expected lines. If you are able to attempt 2 sets and you don't attempt them completely, you are able to attempt 3 questions odd from each of the caselets. Then that is around 6 attempts. And in DILR, ideally you should get really good accuracy of, you should only attempt the questions where you are very sure. So if you have an accuracy of about 80 or 85 percentile, 80 or 85 percentage, sorry, then with 6 attempts, one can expect that you will get 85 percentile and clear the cutoff, minimum cutoff for the top P schools. And if you are able to do 2 sets completely, and the good thing about DILR this year also was that if you got the logic right, you could be fairly confident that your answers are correct, because you could always cross check back and see whether your answers are more or less satisfying the conditions given in the caselet. So if you are able to do 2 caselets completely, that is around 8 odd attempts, 8 to 10 attempts with good accuracy, then that is around 18 to 20 marks, then that's a really good performance with 95 percentile. And an exceptional performance would be being able to do around 2 to 3 caselets, that is around 13 to 15 attempts, and again accuracy should be high in DILR compared to, let's say, VARC. It should be even higher. So if you were able to do around 3 odd caselets, then you can expect 99 percentile provided you solve with good accuracy. So that's a score of about 29 to 31 marks. Okay, now we come to the quant section, where maybe out of the 3 sections, it was in quant across the 3 slots where there was slight bit of a surprise element, although not too much. And the surprise element was that in general, the difficulty level seems to be higher. So before that, let's get into the details of the topics. So as you can see that the questions were based on almost all the topics, all the main topics that are expected. A few of them were missed out. So arithmetic questions, ERPV, many questions on percentages, geometry, progressions. These were the topics with three questions, indices, one question on functions, one on quadratic, and time and work, and so on. So, but there were a few topics on which there was no question asked, and we have a list on those also. So, for example, we didn't have any question on permutation combination this time, or on probability, or on trigonometry, or coordinate geometry also was not there. Overall, the difficulty level of the quant section, based on the feedback of the students, was higher because firstly, there was much more algebra content, not just arithmetic. So many students feel that arithmetic is what is going to comprise the bulk of the questions, but we had lots of algebra based questions. And like I mentioned, a few of the concepts, like there were no questions on graphs, number systems, trigonometry. Functions, there was one question, but not a graph based question or not any technical concepts of functions. And PNC and sets were also omitted. But what was very interesting was that the questions, some of them were multi-concept. And for example, there were some questions where, let's say, some concept of logarithms was also combined with the concept of, let's say, inequalities. So multi-concept questions were there. It was not straightforward. Even there was a time and work question which also had an element of inequality. So something like that. It did require the students to think very deeply about not just that topic, but try to think about what other concept from another topic can be used to solve that question. But this was, like I said, the surprise element was that while VARC and DILR section difficulty level was on expected lines, so those students who had looked at previous patterns would have not felt a big surprise. But in quant, there was definitely an increase in the difficulty level because of two reasons. One is because there was more algebra questions, which typically students perceive to be more difficult than simple arithmetic questions. And two, because even in the arithmetic questions or algebra questions, there were sometimes multi-concept kind of questions. So not too many straightforward questions were asked. There were a few, but less than what we had seen in the previous years. So now coming to the cutoff for the quant section, because when the difficulty level goes up, it should not mean that the student should despair that my number of attempts is much less than what I had planned. Because when the difficulty level goes up, it goes up for all students, and ultimately what matters is your comparative percentile, your comparative performance. And that is why even if a student attempts 4 questions but good accuracy, you have to make sure that you select the questions carefully, whatever are the questions which are from topics that you are good in. And there was a wide variety of topics to choose from. So if you were able to find those 4 questions, we have been telling students that it's very important to scan all the questions. Don't try to do them sequentially so that you don't miss out on the relatively easy questions. So then cutoff should be in the range of about 7 to 9 marks with 85 percentile. Quite a good number of attempts would be around 7 attempts, and here also accuracy should be high. We don't recommend that students should be doing a lot of blind guessing here also. So around 7 attempts, which means around 13 to 15 marks, would place you at the high percentile of 95. And anybody who was able to do about 10 plus number of attempts, we think is an exceptionally good attempts. With good accuracy, you can expect to get around 24 marks if you get around 80% odd accuracy, and that will put you in the 99 percentile slot. So now if I look at overall all the three sections put together, just as a recap of what we have discussed. So in VARC and Quant, the general feedback of the students has been that the difficulty level was high as compared to last year. In VARC, some students are of the opinion that it was similar and some feel that it was high. But in Quant, almost all the students agree that the level was higher than last year. And therefore, that automatically means that the number of attempts of the students would have gone down, which is perfectly all right, because like I said, what matters is percentile. And therefore, especially in Quant, like I said, students who were able to keep their calm, not get flustered that, you know, one by one I'm trying the questions but not able to crack any of them. What was important was to keep your calm and just keep scrolling down the questions. And even in the difficult set of questions, there were a few which were relatively straightforward or relatively easy. And if you were able to do 4 or 5 of them, then that should have been sufficient for you to clear the cutoff. Okay, so now if I look at our first cut, remember the CAT has just finished, and we are still in the process of getting feedback from students, and in the coming days we will get more accurate hold. Of course, it will get more and more fine-tuned in terms of the cutoff, but this is our first cut analysis to help you that overall across the three sections, if you are aiming for the top B schools, if you're aiming for a 90 percentile, so that should be around in the range of 44 to 46 marks with around 17 attempts total across the three sections. If you are aiming for absolutely the topmost B schools, you're aiming at a 95 percentile, that would be about 53 to 55 marks. And the 99 percentile cutoff, according to us at the moment, is around 73 to 76 marks with about 28 odd attempts. But students, first of all, this is still an analysis. This is not a formula, or this is not 100% accurate. This is just our estimate based on our experience and the feedback of students. But despite this, if you by chance have in your own estimate, you have attempted fewer than, let's say, 17 questions, or you are estimating that you have got less than 44 odd marks, you should not despair. First of all, because even if you manage to get about 85 percentile, 80 percentile, there still are many opportunities, many good B schools open for you. And secondly, because, well, until the official answer key is out, you should not feel, try to gauge on your own whether you have done a question correctly or not. So we'll wait for the official key also. So this is just first cut analysis. Now, if I look at all the three slots, morning, afternoon, and evening, and I try to look at the overall look feel of the CAT. So the overall feedback has been that in the third slot, the quant was slightly easier, whereas, quant was slightly tougher, whereas the VARC and DILR was slightly easier than the previous two slots. Marginally, quant was looked at as tougher. And in this slot, the feedback of the students is that overall, on an average, they were able to attempt more questions in VARC as compared to the other two sections. That is an average for you. It might differ. You may have ended up solving more of the DILR questions, but this is just the average. That VARC was perceived to be the relatively easier section than DILR and Quant. So, this is the overall summary of our analysis. Those students who have attempted the CAT in the morning slot or afternoon slot, please do watch the video for these two slots. We have uploaded them for detailed analysis. But the overall summary is this. As you can see, that if I compare the VARC section estimated cutoffs for across morning, afternoon, and evening, so VARC seems to be marginally easier in afternoon and again marginally easier in evening as compared to the morning slot, and the same is true of DILR. But quant, the perception is, or the general feedback is, that quant was tougher and therefore the cutoff has also been reduced. So students, this is our overall analysis as of now. Over the course of the next few days, we will be fine-tuning this estimate, and please do feel free to get back to us for all your queries related to your performance or your estimated percentile score, which B schools you should now target, and what other exams you should take. We are here to solve all your queries. Thanks a lot.